What is it actually like to hold the most powerful job in the world? Is it a story of triumph and control, a mastery of the levers of history? Or is it a story of constant compromise, of impossible choices with no easy answers, and the relentless personal struggle to hold on to who you are in the face of overwhelming pressure? What is the true human weight of the American presidency? In his deeply personal and philosophically rich memoir, A Promised Land, Barack Obama invites us not just into the Oval Office but into his own mind. This book is not a political victory lap or a simple recounting of historical events. It is a profound, introspective, and stunningly honest reflection on the experience of being president. It's the story of an idealist confronting the brutal realities of a broken political system, a commander-in-chief grappling with the moral weight of life-and-death decisions, and a husband and father trying to protect his family from the strange, distorting glare of the public eye. This is more than a memoir. It's a masterclass in leadership, a meditation on the nature of democracy, and a powerful inquiry into the very soul of America. The unlikely ascent. Before we can understand the president, we have to understand the man and the movement that carried him to the White House. The first part of A Promised Land is a powerful exploration of his own improbable journey and the audacious campaign that captured the imagination of the world. Obama writes with deep self-awareness about his own unique identity as a biracial man with a Kenyan father and a mother from Kansas. A man who spent his life navigating different worlds, never quite fitting perfectly into any of them. This experience, he reflects, gave him a unique perspective, a constant sense of being both an insider and an outsider, which would shape his entire political career. His 2008 presidential campaign was a long shot, a political insurgency run by a young, charismatic but relatively inexperienced senator with a funny name. The campaign was built on a single powerful idea, what he famously called the audacity of hope. It was a bet on the possibility of a different kind of politics, one that could transcend the old bitter divisions of race, religion, and party. He believed that Americans, for all their differences, were bound together by a shared set of values and aspirations. The campaign itself was a grueling, exhilarating, and often absurd experience. Obama describes the relentless pace, the logistics of a massive national operation, and the strange, disorienting experience of becoming a symbol, a screen onto which millions of people projected their own hopes and fears. He is brutally honest about the toll it took on his family. He writes with deep love and admiration for Michelle, who was deeply skeptical of politics but who supported his ambition, all while trying to maintain a normal life for their two young daughters, Sasha and Malia. He shares his constant nagging fear that his own ambition was a selfish act that was putting the people he loved most under an unbearable strain. When he finally wins the election, the moment is not one of pure triumph. It is a moment of immense, crushing weight. He feels the hopes of millions of people, not just in America but around the world, resting on his shoulders, and he is immediately confronted with the terrifying reality of the situation he is about to inherit. The audacity of hope was about to collide with the audacity of a crisis. Inheriting the storm, the financial crisis. Barack Obama did not get a honeymoon period. He inherited a world in freefall. The 2008 global financial crisis was the worst economic disaster since the Great Depression. The global banking system was on the verge of total collapse, the stock market was plummeting, and millions of Americans were losing their jobs, their homes, and their life savings. This section of the book is a gripping, high-stakes thriller, a look inside the room as the new president and his team had to make a series of impossible choices to pull the world back from the brink. The philosophical dilemma he faced was agonizing. The very banks and financial institutions whose reckless greed and irresponsible behavior had caused the crisis were now too big to fail. So, Obama had to make a decision that he knew would be politically toxic. He had to use taxpayer money to bail out the very Wall Street firms that had created the mess. He knew it would look like he was helping the villains of the story. He knew it would infuriate ordinary Americans who were suffering. But he also knew, based on the stark warnings of his economic advisors, that it was the only way to prevent a second Great Depression. This is a profound case study in the messy reality of leadership versus the clean purity of ideology. It's easy to stand on the sidelines and demand righteous punishment. It is much, much harder to sit in the Oval Office with the fate of millions of people in your hands and make a pragmatic, imperfect choice to prevent an even greater catastrophe. Obama writes about the immense stress and the political backlash he faced. He was accused of being a socialist, of being a tool of Wall Street, but he held his ground, convinced that he was making the right, though painful decision for the long-term health of the country. This early trial by fire taught him a fundamental lesson about the presidency. The choices you face are rarely between good and bad. They are almost always between bad and worse. The anatomy of a fight, the Affordable Care Act. After stabilizing the economy, Obama turned to the central promise of his campaign: reforming America's broken healthcare system. The battle to pass the Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare, is the longest and most detailed narrative in the book, and it is a masterclass in the gritty, frustrating, and deeply human process of how a law actually gets made in Washington. Obama begins by laying out the moral and economic case for reform. He tells the stories of people he met on the campaign trail who had been bankrupted by medical bills, who had been denied coverage for pre-existing conditions, who were living in constant fear of getting sick. For him, this was not just a policy problem, it was a profound moral failure in the richest country on earth. His initial vision was for a bold, simple, and elegant solution, perhaps a public option, that would compete with private insurance companies. But he quickly ran into the brutal buzzsaw of American politics. The insurance industry, the pharmaceutical lobby, and a unified, fiercely partisan Republican opposition were all lined up to kill any meaningful reform. The story of the ACA is a story of endless, agonizing compromises. To get the bill passed, he had to make deals. He had to abandon the public option. He had to negotiate with skeptical senators from his own party. He had to endure a relentless campaign of misinformation, including the rise of the death panel myth. The process was messy, ugly, and a far cry from the hopeful, unifying politics he had dreamed of. He writes with great honesty about his own frustration and disillusionment. He saw how the sausage was made, and it was not pretty. But through it all, he never lost sight of the ultimate goal: to create a law that would provide health security for millions of people who had none. The final bill was not the perfect bill he had envisioned. It was a complex, imperfect, and politically bruised piece of legislation. But it worked. It prevented insurance companies from denying coverage for pre-existing conditions. It allowed young people to stay on their parents' plans. It expanded coverage to tens of millions of previously uninsured Americans. The fight for the ACA is the book's central lesson in the nature of democratic change. It is rarely clean or inspiring. It is a slow, hard, and often frustrating grind. It is the art of the possible. For Obama, the idealist, it was a painful lesson in pragmatism. He learned that progress is not about achieving perfection in a single bound. It is about fighting, inch by painful inch, to make things a little bit better than they were before. Beyond the domestic battles, A Promised Land gives us a rare and profound look into the mind of a commander-in-chief, grappling with the life and death decisions of war and peace. Obama inherited two ongoing wars, in Iraq and Afghanistan, and he writes with deep anguish about the responsibility of sending young men and women into harm's way. He describes the ritual of signing the letters to the families of fallen soldiers, a task he performed for every single service member who died under his command, as a constant, heavy reminder of the human cost of his decisions. The dramatic and philosophical peak of this part of the story is, without question, the decision to authorize the raid that killed Osama bin Laden in 2011. Obama takes us deep inside the Situation Room, walking us through the intelligence, the risks, and the immense uncertainty of the operation. The evidence that bin Laden was in the compound in Abbottabad, Pakistan was strong, but it was not 100% certain. There was a real possibility that the Navy SEALs would storm the compound and find nothing, a failure that would have immense geopolitical consequences. There was also the grave risk that the mission could go wrong, that American soldiers could be killed or captured. Obama describes the final meeting with his national security team. His advisors were split. Some urged caution, others argued for a less risky drone strike. In the end, the decision was his and his alone. He writes about the process of weighing the probabilities, of trusting his gut, and of making the final, lonely call. He gives the order to go. The chapter describing the raid itself is as tense and gripping as any thriller. He narrates the real-time updates from the raid, the heart-stopping moment when a helicopter crashes, and the final quiet confirmation from Admiral McRaven, Geronimo Iquia, enemy killed in action. The wave of relief is palpable, but even in this moment of triumph, Obama's reflection is somber. He feels no sense of celebration or joy, only a grim satisfaction that a measure of justice has been done, and a deep gratitude that the soldiers under his command had all made it home safely. It is a rare and powerful glimpse into the true, awesome, and deeply humanizing weight of command. Running parallel to these stories of crisis and action is a more somber and troubling theme: the growing polarization of American politics. Obama came into office believing in his power to unite the country, but he quickly found himself confronting a new and virulent form of opposition. He describes the rise of the Tea Party movement, a grassroots rebellion that was fueled by a deep-seated anger and anxiety that he admits he initially failed to fully understand. He details the relentless and often personal obstructionism he faced from the Republican leadership in Congress, whose stated goal was simply to make him a one-term president. And he writes with a quiet, dignified pain about the ugly and persistent undercurrent of racism that fueled much of this opposition, most notably in the birther movement, a conspiracy theory championed by Donald Trump, which falsely claimed that Obama was not born in the United States. He grapples with the painful realization that his very presence in the White House, which for so many had been a symbol of progress and racial healing, was for others a source of deep and profound anxiety, a sign that they were losing their country. This part of the book is a sad and insightful reflection on the limits of a president's power. A president can sign laws, command the military, and set policy. But he cannot, by himself, heal the deep and historic divisions in a nation's soul. Obama writes with a sense of melancholy about his failure to create the post-partisan, unified America he had dreamed of. He came to understand that the promised land of the title was not a destination he could lead the country to in his 8 years in office. It was a much more distant shore. The book ends here, at the end of its first volume in 2011. It is not an ending of triumph. It is a story of hard-won, imperfect progress. It is a testament to the messy, frustrating, and yet indispensable work of democracy. It is a story about the constant struggle between our better angels and our worst instincts, a struggle that takes place both within the nation and within the heart of its leader. It's a profound inquiry into the nature of hope, not the naive optimism of a campaign slogan, but the tough, resilient hope that is forged in the fire of crisis and compromise. If you believe that the story of leadership is a story of the human heart, then you are in the right place. Welcome to Geeky Philosopher. Subscribe, and let's continue to explore the great human questions together.